Is less plastic pollution even possible in the time of COVID and pandemic? There was a big question posed to the plenary of today's session, Sea of Solution 2020. Welcome to session 3. In this session, experts from the region will be sharing the expert view about our current relationship with plastic production and potentially pollution, and show us the way how we could potentially get back on the track with our target of plastic pollution reduction. I'm Kakuko Nagatani Yoshida from United Nations Environment Program, and I am very happy to be hosting this session for next 60 minutes. Now, before we start, for all the audience who have joined today, we would like to first pose you a sort of warming up question in form of Mentimeter. Now, may I ask Anne Tsubasa to share the screen? So, the audience, please look at the screen and log into Mentimeter. And there is a code of the Mentimeter. Would you be able to show the code again? Is that there? Okay, I will not be able to see the code itself.
The code is not visible on the screen, unfortunately, but if you access the chat, please go to menti.com and use the code 3638757. Once again, this is pasted in the chat. You may also click a direct link in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. So the question for you, to all the people in the audience and the speakers as well, is that have you used more plastic items since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic? Some people may say, no, I have been using much less plastic products since the COVID pandemic began. Or some people say, yes, definitely, like maybe myself, thinking that unfortunately we are using more plastic items. But let us hear from you. Please go into the mentimeter.com, type in the code in the chat box, and please start posting your response to this question. And in a few minutes, we will be able to see what we all think. The question for those people who are joining, please go to the mentimeter.com, type in the code in the chat box, and please answer the question on the screen. Have you used more plastic items since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic? Yes, I have used more compared to before, or I have used less.
I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and reshare a little bit. I think I need to quickly refresh the web page. So in just one moment, everything will pop back up.
Okay, all right. So in the meantime, anticipating the answer coming in, I would like to give you the brief information about the flow of this session 3. So we'll have 4 exciting speakers for this session, all giving us their perspective on how our relationship with plastic items have changed during the COVID time, and how we can still remain on track with our shared goal of reducing plastic pollution. So in a few minutes, I will be introducing the speaker one by one, but in the meantime, we are now seeing the results of the Mentimeter survey that we have done quickly. So basically, we are seeing that maybe the largest proportion of the audience feel that, yes, I have used more plastic items since the start of COVID pandemic. Maybe some of them come in the form of packaging, that we see more of those. Maybe if you have asked for the food delivery, e-commerce, online shopping. And also those items that we have been asked or even obligated to use. For example, facial mask. Many of those products are made of plastic. But our perception as an individual consumer is one thing, but hearing experts who have done analysis of the situation is another matter. So now, why don't I introduce the first speaker, who will give us more insight into the situation that we are in. The first speaker we have is Professor Bisu. His full name is Professor Viswanathan, but we call him Professor Bisu with a lot of affection because he is one of the leading scientists that United Nations Environment Program do the joint research and the policy paper. He's at the Department of Energy, Environment and Climate, School of Environment, Resources and Development at the Asian Institute of Technology in Thailand. So let us hear from him. He will be presenting by the title of Plastics and Packaging Waste Management During a Pandemic. Over to you, Professor Bisu.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me a great pleasure for the next 7 minutes make a short presentation on plastic and packaging waste management during this pandemic. Let's start with the situation normal pre-COVID-19 era. Plastic packaging is used in different domains. Plastic is used for industrial packaging, food packaging, medical and pharmaceutical industries, and e-commerce. Versatile plastic package is used in multiple domains. And today, it's a bit difficult to consider a life without plastic. This plastic packaging has brought enormous benefits. For example, having access to good quality water and having reduced food waste consumptions in pharmaceutical and medical industries, a replacement of medical equipment using plastic products. The problem with usage of plastic is the post-consumer waste is the problem. But even in this front, during the last 5 to 6 years, there are numerous positive progresses in terms of 3R sectors, in terms of waste reduction, plastic recycle, and etc. So the problem comes is what happened currently in the COVID-19 disruption. The first fundamental question we need to ask is it totally disrupted because disrupted the plastic packaging sector? The answer is yes. Unlike the previous pandemic like MERS and Ebola and etc., which were for a short period, whereas in COVID-19 has consumed a total disruption in the field of food packaging, e-commerce, healthcare, plastic recycling sector, and across in many countries. Most of the pandemic, as I stated earlier, were regional or short term, whereas COVID-19 is almost a year in existence, and still we do not know how long it will continue. We do not see the light end of the tunnel. And if you look at it, food packaging sector alone, because it is COVID-19 pandemic, the amount of plastic packaging use has been increased. And to give you an example, only in Bangkok City, between April 2019 to 2020, April 2020, there's a 62% of increase in the amount of plastic waste. It is directly linked with the pandemic issues. This scenario can be found in many other countries. For example, in Singapore, when they had 8 days lockdown, the amount, there are 1,400 tons of plastic waste was generated. It's mainly because of the home delivery through the packaged food products, food packaging. Similar thing could be stated for e-commerce. One of the things during the pandemic, and the lockdown, we depend too much on e-commerce, and that resulted in a huge amount of plastic waste. Now, if you look at it at this meantime, the recycling industry, which was successful on pre-COVID era in many countries in South and Southeast Asia. But if you look at it today, Philippines, Vietnam, and India, 80% of the recycling is not operating for the two reasons. One of the oil prices have come down very low. So the plastic recycling industry is not very attractive. On the other hand, it's also, if you look at it, because of these pandemic issues, the plastic is recycling industries are sort of not moving rapidly. But now let's look into this from the current COVID-19, what's left in the future forward direction, the new normal. The first thing is, can we continue business as usual? Certainly no, it is not possible. We need to look at it, sustainability versus hygiene. Is it possible to protect health without overlooking at the environment? And you have noticed, we had a feeling pandemic will not promote recycling activities, or as I stated earlier, it's halted many of the plastic recycling activities. But in June 2020, 100 scientists from 18 countries have stated that based on the best available science and the guidance from the public health profession, it is clear that reusable systems can be used safely, employing the hygiene. So this I've taken into a different norm and different conditions. Okay? And it's very important. Many of the new plastic recycling industries were looking at it, the possibility of where plastic was used in the past to protect a product. But today, the new norm is looks into it. It's not sufficient protecting a product from an external environment. We also have to look at it just packaging, as to look at it hygienically safe. So there is a need to look at it, a new technology, new information, and it tells very clearly the business as usual cannot continue in the new era. And the industry, the safety and hygiene are not determined by an item being disposable or usable, but by how packaging and containers are managed and handled. So industry needs to innovate. Maybe they have to look at it, repacking packages, or developing things like loop packaging systems, or RFID embedded packaging systems. So similarly, that these type of new technologies need to be looked at. Let me sort of summarize my key messages in this short presentation. Plastic packaging is not an issue. Post-consumer packaging waste is certainly an issue. COVID-19 has totally disrupted the packaging industry. Most of the pandemic were regional or short-lived in the past, while COVID-19 is global and it is continuing, and we do not know when it will stop. So it is important for us to look at it. We cannot go back into the old normal situation. We have to look at the new normal, and the plastic packaging and the packaging waste during the pandemic. Overall increase in household packaging, e-commerce purchase has been observed in many countries. Now we need to solve this problem in an innovative way. Recycling industry has had a stop over in the recent years. A combination of impact of COVID-19 and the low oil prices has brought to this abrupt change to the recycling industries. Efforts needed to be taken to review plastic recycling industries. And the industry, you need to innovate, and they cannot continue business as usual. Okay. Canceling reusable schemes do not make sense. Safe and hygiene are not determined by an item being disposable or reusable. Okay. But how packaging and containers are managed and handled is very important. And finally, we need to design hygiene combined sustainability in a packaging thing. To sort of a final statement, I would like to finish with it. Plastic protection without pollution is possible, but consumers should be responsible for the sustainable choice of plastic consumption, and industries should promote innovation and adaptation of smart plastic waste management, and the government should create a conducive environment among these two stakeholders.
Thank you very much, Professor Bisu. That was a very strong message from Professor, saying that basically, yes, COVID have changed the way we use and dispose plastic item. However, that cannot be excuse. We have to share the misconception and innovate and implement the way that we can continue to better manage plastic and plastic waste. Thank you, Professor Bisu. Now, as a second presenter, we also have another representative from academic sector. Second presenter for you is the speaker we have for you today is Dr. So Sasaki. He's a professor at the Faculty of Economics of Chuo University in Japan. And he's also the project leader of a project called Novel Monitoring Procedures for Plastic Waste on Land, funded by Science Technology Research Partnership for Sustainable Development, SATOREPS of Japan. We will be hearing from Dr. Sasaki by his presentation titled National Policy to Beat Plastic Pollution in COVID. National Policy to Beat Plastic Pollution in COVID. Over to you, Dr. Sasaki.
Thank you. Thank you, Kako-san. Can you hear me?
Yes, very clearly.
Okay. Okay. Good evening. Xin chao. Sawadee-ka. Konbanwa. My name is So Sasaki from Chuo University in Tokyo. It's a great honor to speak here today. And first, what I'd like to emphasize my presentation is COVID-19 has not changed anything, but promotes existing new technologies such as Zoom, and also made clear existing problem such as waste management and recycling for plastic. So if so, we could handle them, I believe. I'd like to introduce the case study from Thailand. And why Thailand? And yes, because the amount of waste plastic increase was presented Professor Peace has already mentioned about the detail. So this slide is skipped. And the increase of waste plastic has a big impact on recycling markets and recycling industry. In Thailand, domestic waste plastic prices are cheapest. So this recycling market condition is the same in most Asian countries, such as Indonesia, Vietnam, and also Japan. In Thailand, in response to this market situation, the separate collection project, the demonstration project, has been started by private companies called as PPP Plastic in Thailand. Please attention to this photo. In this project, consumers should clean and dry and bring to 12 type of the plastic to the retailer. So frankly speaking, I expected this project to be difficult because almost local government in Thailand do not collect waste separately. What do you think about this project? What about the result? And it is necessary to get and analyze the data of this project. But as far as fixed point observations, this project has been able to collect clean plastic clean waste plastic, which is not mixed. So we can call it is successful, this project. By the way, plastic recycling in Thailand has depended on informal sector. So therefore, recycling pellets, recycled material is poor quality due to mixed other waste, as shown on this picture. If the sorting project with consumer cooperation could be continued, I think would be possible to produce high quality recycled materials, as shown in the picture below, this one. Anyway, I think it is good opportunity for Thailand to consider plastic recycling law. When Japan has introduced the first recycling law as Container and Package Recycling Act in 1995, we threw away 1.13 kilogram per person per day. This is the same weight as in 2017 in Thailand. So I want to, this slide, the most important here is EPR. EPR is in extended producer responsibility. EPR does not mean to left everything to producer. It is important to divide the role of each sector for recycling and EPR to be effective. I'd like to summarize the key findings as following. First is the amount of waste plastic increased during COVID-19 in most countries. Second point is increased waste plastic has big impact on recycling market and industry. And third point is in Thailand, demonstration project to sorting waste plastic by private company is successful. And the final point is it is a good opportunity to reconsider the recycling market depending on the informal sector, and also to consider plastic recycling law in that time. That's all I want to say. Thank you for attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sasaki. Yes, so maybe there is some common thread coming out between the two speakers that we have heard so far. It seems like roles and responsibility and the COVID time, how best to manage plastic item, and particularly when they become waste, is very important. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Sasaki. Now, let me introduce the third speaker. At the same time, I will call upon all the audience. I'm pretty sure by hearing these speakers, you have some questions that you would like to pose to individual speakers or all speakers toward the end of today's session. So please go ahead and post your question in chat box, and we'll be collecting those questions, and we will try to have some time toward the end of session 3 to respond to some of your questions. So please continue to post your question to the chat box for us. The third speaker I have is Dr. Rashid Hussein. He is part of United Nations, and particularly from an UN agency that is became most famous over any other UN agency during the COVID time. He is a regional advisor of WASH and climate change of the World Health Organization, WHO, regional office for Southeast Asia in New Delhi. Also, he held a very prominent role in his backcountry. He was the Minister of State for Health from 2014 and 2018. So Dr. Rashid Hussein, we would like to hear from you with current role in WHO, the health authority of United Nations, but maybe also from your point of view as the leading role that you held in your home country. But let me hand over microphone to you, Dr. Rashid, over to you.
Thank you, Kakuko, and very good morning, good afternoon, or good evening from where you are attending this webinar. First slide, please. Today's reality is that plastic pollution is a huge problem, and it's not too late to fix it. Collectively, nations and individuals need to make commitments to ensure our planet is saved from the devastating effects of plastic pollution. Misuse and mismanagement of durable plastics is causing environmental pollution, posing a risk to organisms, ecosystem, biodiversity, and human health. Unsustainable use and disposal of plastic products in our societies are not only threatening economies, ecosystems, and human health, but of our very own existence, of course. We don't know exactly as a region the estimation of how much extra waste was produced during the COVID-19 pandemic, but some estimations say it could be 60% and above normal times. There are few reasons for recent increase in waste, as we could all understand, due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We have seen a huge increase in e-commerce, which has certainly increased the plastic waste. Obviously, there has been increase in masks and PPEs and gloves more than the normal time due to the pandemic, and also the use of these by many, including public, given the nature of COVID-19. There has been, of course, increase in single-use plastic in the food industry and delivery as certain actions by individuals, as has been discussed by previous speakers. We must say no to single-use plastics. Next, please. During the pandemics, it is important to make sure that waste is properly and safely collected, treated, and disposed of, including plastic waste. In many countries during the COVID-19 pandemic, it is estimated that the number of waste, including plastics and healthcare waste, did increase. In this regard, I think we need to accelerate our efforts to strengthen governance to tackle healthcare and plastic waste during and beyond the COVID-19 pandemic as integral part of the overall management framework. Evidence-based but context-friendly and affordable waste management processes must be introduced. COVID-19 pandemic has diverted the waste plastics are produced, used, and disposed. As said earlier, due to increase in e-commerce and so on, we have seen this. Therefore, planning with involvement and empowering of key actors through the whole process is important. Challenge of hazardous plastic waste management mounted, and pollution with single-use plastic products is accelerating. We need to have right action at the right time. Importance to segregate hazardous and non-hazardous waste at the point of generation, risk management, affordable technologies, good practices, and WHO and other organizations' guidelines, recommendations, and tools that are available should be used at all times. Next, please. Now let's look at the hierarchy of waste management options. I will not go into details of this, but you can get more details on this through WHO publication on technologies for treatment of waste, more specifically in healthcare and in general settings. Next, please. COVID-19 has significantly increased plastic needs and demands. It is also partly with the efforts to keep people safe and prevent from getting sick. We must always ensure that our biodiversity is protected and not harmed through our actions. Our reliance on plastics during this time increased due to some of our needs. And I think we need to focus on a couple of things. Like for instance, we of course have to maintain the regulation of production and consumption. We need to have more eco designs, perhaps increasing the demand for better management options. We must also focus on more awareness, use of renewable energy for recycling, perhaps more producer responsibility over waste and innovations. We need improvements in waste collection systems and individual as well as collective societal responsibility. Now, if we look at the results of perhaps transmission risks on different surfaces, something that has been discussed over time, I think viable COVID-19 virus was detected to be found on surfaces for periods ranging from hours to days, depending on the ambient environment, including temperature and humidity, and the type of surface. I mean, in particular, at high concentration in healthcare facilities where COVID-19 patients were being treated. Despite consistent evidence as contamination of surfaces and the survival of the virus on certain surfaces, there are no specific reports which have directly demonstrated fomite transmission. However, it is considered a likely mode of transmission given consistent findings about environmental contamination and the vicinity of infected cases, and the fact that other coronaviruses and respiratory viruses can transmit this way. There is a misnotion that single-use plastic may prevent from fomite transmission, thus increasing single-use plastic. It is important that we maintain proper hygiene, washing hands and social distancing as the best ways rather than polluting environment by using plastic, single-use plastic. We must ensure plastic management, need to take measures to handle a pandemic and waste at the same time. COVID-19 prevention or overcoming the pandemic should not rely on single-use plastic, and every possible action to preserve our environment should be given the priority. We must also ensure waste management staff safety. Even some of the volunteered cleaning efforts were disrupted during this time. So what can we do? Obviously, it starts from individual actions and commitment. There are some ways, some easy switches that you can make in our daily life, like things like carrying a metal water bottle with you to avoid purchasing more plastic bottles, use of reusable bags when you go shopping, opting for products that use less packaging. Your business shopping and procurement is one way to make a significant difference over time. We must always focus on the vulnerable and leave no one behind. Biodiversity should be protected for generations to come. Our doings today will jeopardize SDG goals and our own existence. Actions of individuals matter. Every individual can make a difference, and together we all can make a magnanimous change. Take your pledge today to reduce single-use plastic. Of course, we want to have more resilient systems to cope with climate change impacts, and we need to prevent pollution from plastic. Staying clean is possible without plastic pollution, and I must say a greener recovery is certainly possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rashid. So that was Dr. Rashid speaking from United Nations Organization, World Health Organization of the Sierra. He's a specialist on the regional advisor on water and climate change, and he was speaking on the safe disposal of plastic waste during the COVID crisis and beyond. So there are ways to stay safe and clean, and certain use of plastic items during the COVID is essential. However, the fight to protect people's life and health should not be and doesn't have to come in the place of plastic pollution. So we can continue to reduce plastic pollution and while staying safe and clean. Thank you, Dr. Rashid. Now, that's a perfect segue to hear from my fourth speaker. We have already talked about, heard about the academia perspective about what's happening, what can be still possible during the COVID. And then we hear from WHO experts, how we can stay safe and clean, hygienic, and still continue to do better waste management and use only the essential plastic. But we heard also that another sector that may potentially have contributed to the more plastic waste in the COVID time is those sectors that have needed to use more plastic because the customer demands, the business demand. It's a food industry sector. So why don't I invite my fourth speaker, who is Dr. Edwin Shah. He is the head of sustainability of the food industry Asia. He's based in Singapore. And not only that, he has a very important role in the FIA today. He was the first Southeast Asian elected to the board of the Global Eco-Labeling Network and was nominated for Singaporean of the Year in 2016 for his role in leading the fight against haze, another form of very important pollution. But today we would like to hear from Edwin, his perspective and how the FIA bringing together the major brand owner of the food industry coming together and how they are dealing with the plastic issue during the COVID pandemic. Over to you, Edwin.
Thank you, Kakuko. Good afternoon, everybody. Let me begin by sharing a couple of key findings from two studies that Food Industry Asia was involved this year. The first was with a regional study with the UNEP. In fact, it was with Kakuko's team in the Bangkok office. And we wanted to gather consumer and food business insights across the region on their perceptions on plastics and packaging waste. Can we go to the next slide, please? So from the consumer insights, some of the top line findings you can find is that, overwhelming amount of the 90% are concerned about plastic waste. But that doesn't translate to action because only about half of them will be willing to buy a product that is packaged with recycled material. Of course, the second point, there are differences across 5 countries, and that's important, especially when we think about solutions. And the third point is, from the consumer perspective, what more can be done by governments? And 2 important points that was pointed out is mandatory source segregation, as well as increasing and enhancing waste collection. Next slide, please. From the business perspective, and bearing in mind this is gathered from food businesses across the region, so not just multinationals, but local companies. Many companies, they understand that their efforts are not sufficient. And they also know that, while they have targets, a lot of this are not publicly communicated. And the importance of having it publicly communicated is that you hold yourself accountable and you are, you're open to getting tracked on how far you are in terms of your plastics waste and use. And a lot of the businesses are also aligned with consumers in terms of what they feel needs to be done from a policy perspective. So things like waste segregation, even clear labeling, so as not to confuse consumers, in fact, to help them. And the third part is, of course, mandatory reporting by businesses. And the last point is quite important. We find that a large majority of companies are not even part of any platform to talk about industry action and efforts towards plastics and packaging waste. Next slide, please. And so these are some of the key points for consumers, food companies, and governments to look at as we look at solutions. And I think you can say that these opportunities exist pre-COVID or not. But I think COVID-19 has highlighted a lot more of these things that needs to be done. So again, for consumers, become more aware, change their habits and preferences. For food and beverage companies, they have to start to act on it very quickly. And for governments, there are a few policy and infrastructure areas that they could look at. Next slide, please. And the second study that we were involved in, Food Industry Asia commissioned a Singapore-based startup called AI Palette to look at consumer consumption purchasing trends during the COVID period. So they started to look at data and consumer behavior from January to August this year. And interestingly enough, between January and April this year, 4 out of these 5 countries had shown that packaging was amongst the top 5 areas of concern or something that the consumers look at when they buy stuff. But from May to August, packaging didn't feature in any of these top 5 areas for all these 5 countries. So you know, it again begs the question on whether consumers are aware or sufficiently you know, interested and knowledgeable. Next slide, please. And I'm going to run through very quickly the next few slides, but it's just really to again highlight what are the items that consumers are consuming from a food perspective. So you have, for example, fresh fruits and vegetables. That's no big mystery, because a lot more people are eating at home, cooking at home, and given that a lot of the dining places are closed, they don't have a choice. And of course, you look at the long shelf life kind of items are basic staples like rice and noodles. In Singapore and Malaysia, noodles are coming down, but you know, other than that, it's going up. And bearing in mind, these items again require a lot of packaging. Next slide, please. So it's the same for you know, Indonesia and Thailand. You look at there's this very healthy growth in fruits and vegetables, fresh produce, if you would. And you know, apart from rice in Indonesia, noodles and things like that continue to grow. Next slide, please. And then we look at bakery products, so snacks. And again, you see across the countries, it's increasing, and it's no surprise, because more people again are working from home. And there was a period of time, even in Singapore, where schools were closed and students had to stay at home. So you have larger families and households staying at home, eating at home, trying to relieve themselves from boredom and lockdowns, and so they turn to snacking. But the good thing is also when you look at dairy products, yogurt and milk are increasing because I think of the health benefits. Next slide. And this just shows again, Indonesia seems to be an anomaly amongst the 5 countries, because they seem to be, I don't know, maybe it points to them being healthier, because if you can see all the red numbers there going down, so perhaps maybe they're snacking less. And the next slide. And then, so this slide talks about QSRs, your quick service restaurants, so the fast food restaurants, what people are consuming. Again, no big surprise. Next slide, please. And this is just completing the picture for this slide. I think this is the last slide, but the point I wanted to make, and this corresponds to what some of the earlier speakers has mentioned, that you look at the problem is with post-consumer waste, not so much the packaging itself. Within the food industry, how has this rising trend in prepackaged production, food consumption affected packaging? It's a straight no that, you know, because a lot of our packaging has already been made for purpose. So we don't change it just because consumption has increased. But at the same time, I think it points to the fact in one of my earlier slides that you really then need to look at the basic waste collection facilities within these countries, because like it or not, in this short term, until things get back to normal, if they ever will, people are going to be working from home, consuming from home, eating more at home, cooking more at home. They're going to buy more of these products. And the food industry, I think at this point in time, we also you know, a bit concerned about tinkering with packaging formats at this time, because you don't know how you'll respond. But the good news is that you know, we're not letting down on our sustainability commitments, and we're pushing ahead on several fronts. So on innovation, companies are investing in multi-million-dollar research projects, and a lot of them are out there already in the market. So it's not just about talking or future plans, it's already in existence. We're driving policy We want to advocate for source segregation. We want to advocate for businesses to have to report their waste usage and management. And we are also developing standards of our own on recycled material for food packaging. And that's something that we will advocate. It's already in the works, and we want to advocate with several of the Asian food contact material regulators. And in terms of producer responsibility, I think we are also driving ahead with that. We have already established a couple of industry-led voluntary producer responsibility organizations in Vietnam last year, in Indonesia this year, and in Singapore, FIA together with other local stakeholders, we are engaging the Singapore government to talk about the implementation of a deposit refund scheme for beverage containers in 2022. So all this means that, you know, again, if you look at the UNEP research that we did, 200 companies and a few thousand consumers can't be wrong in terms of seeking a few of these changes that needs to be done. So waste collection is a key part. And so I think, again, COVID-19 has shown a clear need to enhance waste collection and waste collection and you know, recycling abilities of these countries. So I'll leave it at that, but happy to engage the other speakers in the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Edwin. That was Mr. Edwin Shah, Head of Sustainability of Food Industry Asia, sharing his insight, and particularly from the current role he holds at the FIA, how they have seen the change in consumer behavior and related to food industries over the pandemic, and what cannot be changed, meaning that we should not letting down our sustainability target, as he put it, even with the changes that we have seen during the COVID. We all, each one of us, whether the business or consumer or government authority, we have a role to play. Okay, so with that, we have introduced to you 4 fantastic speakers we have for session 3. Now, remaining time that we have in a session, I would like to take the opportunity to take some of the questions from the audience to any individual speaker or collectively to the speaker that I have. So I will have all the speakers as a panelist. And the session assistant, Anne, have been collecting and screening some of the questions. So the first question I have for the speaker, I cannot say who is the speaker yet. The first question goes like this. One of the member of the audience said, I would like to hear from the panel about the importance of correct pandemic communication in terms of plastic usage. For example, differentiating between frontline professional versus population with less risk of exposure, breaking myth about plastic usage, what is really essential. Okay, it's a bit of a long question, so let me first pose this one to our health expert. Dr. Rashid from WHO Seattle, would you like to first respond to this question? How can we differentiate what is the necessary plastic usage in terms of COVID to stay safe and clean? For example, distinguishing what is necessary for frontline officers and for those people who are less of the risk. Over to you, Dr. Rashid.
Thank you, Kakuko, and thank you for this question, which is very important and relevant. I think we as WHO has, of course, during the COVID pandemic has released interim guidance for waste management in different contexts, and I will share the guidance link in this window as well. I think as it has been about the question asks about the responsibility of what would be the right institution and all that. And I think some of the, when it comes to the plastic specific management or the technologies, We normally provide the options and the technical advices on our side, and I think the implementation comes to the responsible governments and authorities who are responsible for implementing those. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, it comes as a societal as well as individual responsibility as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rashid. Then the continuation of that same question, maybe now I will ask both Professor Bisu and Dr. Sasaki. From your point of view, we now all use plastic item, whether it's the food that package that it came in, or the individual personal mask that we have to use. I use a cloth mask so that I can wash and reuse. But I know that using disposal, those face masks is also quite common practice. Now, those one, we throw away in our dustbin, correct, at home. Now, as an individual consumer or household, what kind of waste management practice you think we should be practicing? Maybe let me hear first briefly from Dr. Bisu, and then I will also ask Dr. Sasaki the same question. Over to you, Dr. Bisu. Please turn on your microphone, Dr. Bisu. And make sure that your camera is also on, all the speakers, please.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think it's very important. We need to create awareness and educate people during this epidemic how to get rid of certain products, like especially facial mask, okay? And what happens at the moment we dispose them like a municipal solid waste. I think we need to train them. One of the easy method is if you take a facial mask and you have a tissue paper and you put the facial mask on top of the tissue paper and you wrap it, then you throw it, okay, into a municipal solid waste. So this sort of a simple awareness, creativeness has to be practiced. In Thailand, in some sectors, they do it very nicely. I think we have to be ready. That's why I'm saying we're going to face more and more this type of epidemics in future. I think we need to start training people and how to react this type of situation. It's very important. I think I'll stop at this point.
Thank you, Dr. Bisu. Yes, some awareness and doing simple act based on awareness will be good. What do you think, Dr. Sasaki? Any advice, maybe from your experience in Japan? What are we recommended to do?
Yes, actually, so I have Professor Piso already mentioned about so waste management is very important, I think so. And I introduce writing in chat, IGES and UNEP some guideline waste management during COVID pandemic. So this is a good reference for the next pandemic situations. So that's all.
Thank you. Yes, there are guidelines, those that have been produced by some of the governments and intergovernmental entity like UNEP, WHO, and also a technical entity like IGES that we could refer to. Then the same question, but with slightly different angle. For the food industry, maybe a bit larger than the food, maybe I'll make it food sector. Edwin, from your point of view, we have seen now the more restaurants that used to be offering the solid, the ceramic or the silver forks and knives, cutlery, even for dining in guests. Now they are served with plastic cup and cutlery. What do you think about this? Any opinion?
Thanks, Kakuko. Yes, there's always going to be a problem, and I was going to share with this. This is what you see very often: individually wrapped, wet, sanitized, wet wipes in restaurants. And again, the wrappers represent very difficult to recycle packaging. And I see it very often in Singapore. Now they don't wrap the cutlery in napkins, paper napkins. They wrap it in. Some put in plastic. Some give you plastics to put your mask in. So I think we really need to be out there. I think the comment about communications that whether or not certain types of material are good enough to keep all the utensils safe and clean, and is there a need to resort to additional types of packaging that they are very difficult to recycle. And I think to add to the earlier points about the proper disposals of masks, perhaps we might even have to prepare for special bins and processes where all these sanitary stuff has to be thrown in or deposited in different bins so as not to mix up with your typical waste streams.
Great. Yes, I cannot agree more, Edwin. Okay, it has been so interesting here from this very prominent expert of their analysis, opinion, and experience. But sadly, this session is coming toward the end of its time available. So, but we cannot close this session without hearing from the audience as well. One more time using Mentimeter. I will ask Anne to again post the code that we will be able to see on the screen. The question will be posted to the audience. And there is a code for you to copy and type into the Mentimeter so that you can participate in this survey. The question posed to you, every one of you in the audience and the speakers, because while the audience is answering, I will ask the same question once more to the speakers. And speaker, please respond in a very short sentence, or short few words. Fitting in the last part of this question, the question to the audience and speakers is the following. Staying clean and safe is possible without plastic pollution, even during the COVID time, if we have more of what? This word part is something that we would like you to answer. So speakers, are you ready? I will go by the order of the speaking slot that you had today. So please, first I will ask Professor Bisu, how you will fit in this what part? Staying clean and safe is possible without plastic pollution if we have more of?
Yes, I strongly feel the consumer should be responsible for a sustainable choice of plastic consumption, and the industry also should innovate new technologies.
Okay, so consumer behavior and the business responsible business. Okay, how about Dr. Sasaki? What do you say?
Yes, if we have better waste management.
Waste management. Okay. So now I will come to Dr. Rashid. How would you fit in that gap?
Of course, I think as I have been mentioning throughout my presentation, it is the consumers, individual as well as societal responsibility, more awareness and more technological options that will lead us to a greener recovery. Thank you.
Great, Dr. Rashid. And lastly, not but least, Edwin from FIA. How would you complete the sentence?
Yep, I think in 4 areas. So more education, more communication, more waste management or better waste management, and better waste segregation.
Great. And what the audience say? Okay, that was last round of refreshing. Okay, there is a big fight going on. Now, this is what you're seeing on the screen is what you have responded. So there is some tug of war going between the better waste management and awareness. The third, the strongest voice is coming in form of technology. So thank you, audience. Thank you, all the speakers, for joining the session 3 today, the plastic protection without pollution. It has been offered by the UNEP and COBC in the form of Sea of Solution 2020. With your help, we will have more awareness and the waste management and technology to beat plastic pollution. Thank you. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for attending Sea of Solutions 2020 as well as today's session. These are, oops, one second. Let me share my screen to show you the upcoming sessions for today. While I get that up, please remember to join the upcoming sessions by the Hubilo community, which I will paste the link for right now. Give me one moment. I will find the link in 1 second. I apologize. But
Yes.
within the
And
yeah.
also, please list the very interesting lightning talk by group called ReGlove. It's 9 young engineers that have invented a new technology to completely recycle on-site any surgical gloves that are being used at the hospital and clinics. Their talk is available as a lightning talk in Hubalo.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Kakuko. And just to remind everyone, within the Hubalo community, you can explore the exhibitions as well as chat or set up meetings with other conference attendees. And we'd really like you to invite your contribution to showcasing your voices for solutions to plastic solution. We are seeking a simple but powerful pledge, which is a commitment or statement to less plastic waste from the perspective of your work. So please submit your pledge by going to the Hubalo community via the link in the chat that I've just sent and clicking pledges. Thank you once again for your participation today and have a wonderful day. I will show the next sessions up on the screen right now for your reference, just so you have that with you. Here you go. And thank you everyone so much again for your participation, and thank you to the speakers for a wonderful panel. Thank you everyone.